Hello again, Gordon Causey, after a 3-4 day hiatus, coming to you live and unscripted from my little corner of southeastern Ontario, Canada. Today it's now 12:47 a.m. on the 14th of August, which makes this the Monday. I have been doing Sunday night, late Sunday. I call them or whatever, freewheeling Sundays is what I've been calling them. And this is under that banner, so to speak, just talking about what's going on in the world. And I thought a good thing to do would be to revisit the three predictions that I made. If you scroll back through my videos, I think it's under 3 months ago, although it might be 2 months ago that it's tabbed under. But it was on a video I put out on April 30th of 2023. And making three predictions. And the three predictions were, number one, that before this summer came to an end, that we would see the declaration of a climate emergency. And in subsequent videos, and maybe in that video too, I'm not going to rewatch it. I might have spoken of the fact that, I could see them declaring it as a so-called war on climate change. We've had the war on drugs, we've had the war on this, the war on that. So I could see absolutely them branding a war on climate change. We've already had the fires in Canada, in Alberta, Quebec, Nova Scotia, that inundated the northeastern United States and parts of the Midwest, even into, I think, Chicago, Milwaukee, Detroit. And then there have been now wildfires in Greece. They've been reported on widely. And of course, now currently, it's the situation in Maui, Hawaii, Lanai, I forget the name of the specific city. I think it's Lanai, something like that. And with all kinds of speculation going on about the origins of those fires, some are speculating on the use of a direct energy weapon. It just seems the ground is shaking under our feet. And in that video of April 30th, what I spoke to was the fact that Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, had predicted, this going all the way back to November of last year, the G20, the world's 20 biggest economies, the G20 summit was held in Bali, Indonesia. And there's something of a parallel conference going on at the same time. There's the official G20 summit, and then a parallel summit with corporate leaders and such. And it was that parallel summit that Klaus Schwab addressed. And he told the attendees there that the world could expect in the coming months more, quote unquote, black swan events. Bad things. We could expect bad things, black swan events. It's a term that you'll hear used in the stock market, a black swan event versus a white swan event. A black swan is, in the stock market is when it's announced that a company has failed to achieve its projected sales targets, revenue targets, whatever, or maybe there's been a major negative event happen with a publicly traded company. That's called a black swan event. If a company blows away their projections, if their guidance, the guidance that they gave is surpassed monumentally, that's called a white swan event. Well, Klaus Schwab warned us that to expect black swan events, and they're happening. The wildfires in Canada, in Greece, now in Hawaii, and I don't think it's going to end. I think we're going to see more of this. I think it's predictable. When we talk about this build back better messaging that every government around the world echoed everywhere, Biden said it, Trudeau said it, Boris Johnson, when he was Prime Minister of Great Britain, he said it, everyone was talking, using the same talking point. We're going to build back better. Or, if you use the language of this great reset, the whole thing is, if you're going to build back, if you're going to reset everything, first you got to tear everything down first. And that's what we're witnessing in our world today. Everything is being torn down. And so, and interestingly enough, I will submit that it's the same individuals tearing it down that want to build back. So that was the first prediction, and I'm not backing down. I see no reason to revisit that prediction. It looks even more certain than ever that at some point this summer, and remember, summer doesn't come to an end until September 21st, 2023. So still a month or so, a month and a week to go before the summer comes to an end. And what I see happening is I see us, and by us, I mean the general population, it's going to be sensory overload. There's the so-called climate emergency, which I believe is being manufactured. That'll be one. Number two, my second prediction was about the reemergence of either a COVID or perhaps, this, what were they calling it? The Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. There's talking Marburg virus. Goodness knows. I mean, there's so many diseases out there that they can weaponize. I certainly think COVID will be among the mix, whether or not there are other diseases being thrown in, seasonal influenza, RSV, whatever. So I can see that coming. And then finally, my last, and in terms of a health emergency, I would see that happening in the fall, latter part of September, October. And then before the year comes to an end, an escalation of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and perhaps war zones extending to other regions like Taiwan, China, Middle East, goodness knows. I mean, there's always the potential for war in any number of places. All you need is the right set of circumstances and things blow up. And so what I could see happening, and goodness knows there could be other things. There could be other so-called, to use Klaus Schwab's term, black swans. And I can see it as being sensory overload for the vast majority of the population, because on the one hand, we're going to have the climate emergency, we're going to have a health emergency, we're going to have war, and people will be looking for a savior, for a deliverer, for something to, someone to tell them everything's going to be okay. And that those voices will be there. They will be emanating from our government officials. They'll assure us that if we simply do as we're told, if we obey whatever mandates, whatever restrictions, whatever measures are implemented, that this is our ticket back to safety and security. I think they could even they may even just toss out the idea of things going back to normal. They might even at that point be willing to say to us that we're not going back to normal, but we can get back to safety and security. Things are ramping up. Although at the same time, if you turn off the news and shut down social media and just live your life, it's easy to operate under the illusion that everything's hunky-dory, everything's normal. Let's plan our vacation. Let's do this. Let's do that. If we look at, the world of sports, Blue Jays are continuing to play to packed stadium. They played the Chicago Cubs today, packed stadium, packed stadiums all over. I think the Women's World Cup is still going on. I'm not following it at all. I don't care. But, so it's easy to have this illusion that everything is, under control, so to speak, but not if you live on Maui, not if you live on the Greek islands. And I think it's going to spread. It's going to, there's so much. This great reset, these 15-minute smart cities, this, what Yuval Noah Harari, who's a top advisor of the World Economic Forum, watch his videos. He talks about it, the fact that we are now entering the era of the surveillance state, of surveillance under the skin. There's a new COVID shot coming out in the fall. Just read an article today that it will be available in the United States. They're saying September, that in Canada, that it will be available here October, November. And things are crazy. In my own workplace, and I'm not going to say where I work, but it's a large retail setting. Hundreds of people come in and out every single day. And one individual came into work, and apparently this individual had symptoms, respiratory disease symptoms, be it cold, flu, COVID, whatever. Apparently had scratchy throat and headache or whatever, but wasn't feeling too bad, and tested himself for COVID, and the test came up positive, but he came into work regardless, and I don't care. But this individual normally wouldn't be wearing a mask, and he was wearing a mask on this particular day. I came into work, I think it was on Thursday, might have been Wednesday, doesn't matter. It was last week, just a few days ago. And I came into the staff room, and there was a lively discussion going on. Some people telling him he should not have come into work, other people saying, oh, leave him alone. And one of the management staff had come out and said, he did nothing wrong. He's allowed to be here, but he's going home. You, everyone calm down. You, pointing at the individual, go home. And some individuals, I don't want to overstate it, not everyone was hyperventilating over it, but those who do hyperventilate tend to be the loudest, and they make the most noise, and they attract the most attention. And they were quite concerned that this individual who had tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, probably using a rapid test, I didn't ask him. It occurred to me that I should have given him a hug, or at least gone up and shook his hand. But why throw gasoline on a fire with those who are already irrationally afraid, except to be a bit of a, pardon the expression, a bit of a shit disturber, which sometimes I feel like being. But anyway, we'll see what happens in the coming day. As I always say, in the coming days, weeks, months, we'll see what happens. Summer still, we've still got, a month and a week to go. September 21st is a ways away. But, this idea, there's something just doesn't sit right with these wildfires, especially the ones in Maui. Directed energy weapon is being punted by some. Interestingly, the fact-checking sites that I've seen, they haven't said no to that. They just say it's unproven, that there's no evidence to suggest that there's no evidence to show that it was a direct energy weapon which caused these fires. Well, absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. Just because they don't have evidence that it was a direct energy weapon doesn't mean that it wasn't. It just means they are unable at this point to prove it. Unfortunately, what happens is you have individuals who are hooked on engagement, they want to see their Instagram account, their Facebook account, their Twitter account. They want to see it blow up. They want to see something they post go viral. And so they're less than circumspect in sharing things around. And one of the things that has been shared is this image of something of a laser beam type thing coming down on an island somewhere. It might be Maui, it might not. I don't know. I don't care. You have to be incredibly skeptical about anything you see, whether it be from the mainstream media outlets or from social media outlets. You can't trust anything these days. can't trust, in Canada, CBC, CTV Global. And you certainly, unless unless you see it firsthand directly yourself, or have a high level of trust and know an individual. And in most cases, what happens is things get shared virally on social media platforms that are inflammatory, and people accept them religiously as being true without, you can't just blindly accept anything, be it from the mainstream or be it from users of social media. Frankly, I do think there's more credibility on the social media side than the mainstream side. I think with social media users, the difficulty is people are hooked on engagement. They want to see something they post go viral. So you have to be cautious there. When it comes to the mainstream media, typically they're pushing an agenda. I've started reading this publication, which I've got no problem with the name, but I have a problem with the way it's said. I pronounce this word epoch, EPOCH, meaning an era, a time period, an epoch. But most individuals, including individuals associated with the publication itself, they pronounce it epic, which is spelled EPIC, but arose by any other name. And what I love about this publication, though, I feel like I'm reading a newspaper back in the 70s or 80s, because what you're getting is they'll give you both sides of at least two sides of an issue. In terms of, say, the COVID vaccines, if you're reading a CBC news article, you will only ever see an individual promoting them. You will never see an individual who's skeptical or who has concerns. They only present one side, and they present that one side as fact. In the epic times, or epoch times, as I think they more should be called, in this epoch times, they will give you the government, the approved narrative, but then they'll also give you dissenting views, contrary views, opposing views. And that's the way media used to operate. But if you go through this publication, I'm assuming that it's entirely user supported. I get this from a neighbor, and interestingly, she's doing what they tell her to do, because 6 ways to share the Epoch Times. Number one is pass it on. Done with your weekly paper, pass it along to a friend, family member, neighbor, or coworker. And that's what my neighbor does. After she's done reading it, she gives it to me, and she's amazing because she puts it all nice, neatly, and back in order for me. So the issue that I have is the Ontario edition, August 3rd to 9th. So it's a little old. That's okay. Their lead story is banks taking lead in establishing personal social credit system. Something that people should be aware of, that the Chinese have a system, their social credit score. Well, now there's talk that banks in the UK are implementing it, and that people are having their ability to access their accounts and such. They're being restricted based on things like political views. You're guilty of thought crime, we're shutting down your account. Then there's an article here. We are totally awash in pseudoscience. Nobel Prize winning physicist on climate agenda. There's an article here on what's happening in the U.S. Trump indicted over efforts to challenge the 2020 election results. And then another one for Canada. Nation, as Canada becomes more restrictive, resistance is growing, experts say. So I enjoy reading this now. I feel like I'm going back in time. But anyway, I'll keep it under 20 minutes. Nothing too specific. I don't have much to say on the Maui situation, on the wildfire situation in Hawaii. There's already tons out there already, but it's feeding into the climate change narrative agenda And how that's going to be used, I don't think it's good. I think we're probably a month or so away, and maybe less, before September 21st rolls around. I think we're going to see the declaration of a global climate emergency, and maybe they might even bill it as the war on climate change. And I think that makes sense because in terms of war, then you can ration. It's something that's been done during World War I and World War II, rationing. And they could ration out things on the basis that, well, we have to do it. We have to limit our consumption because we're at war with climate. The world's gone crazy. Anyway, God bless. The next time I do a video, I wanted to do a video, and I still want to do it, talking about Genesis, talking about belief in the Bible, talking about how the population has been programmed to totally disregard anything that's contained within Scripture, to view it as unreliable, untrue mythology, and books that were written thousands of years ago with wisdom that has persisted throughout the ages is now being thrown in the garbage. And most people will default to that because they've been told to believe that if you're an intelligent person, then you don't believe the Bible, that you don't see any value in it. And as a result, people don't want to read it themselves, so they just want to hold what is viewed as the smart, intelligent opinion. And so they default to it because they've been programmed to think that, to believe it, and that's the way they're told to feel about it. So that's what they go with. And so my next video, or maybe not the next one, but soon, hopefully within the next week or so, that'll be what I'm talking about. And I'll end it off by saying my buddy Mark and I have a podcast called Wisdom and Knowledge. And tomorrow evening, I'll be interviewing the director and the producer of this film, The Essential Church, which is focused on primarily on John MacArthur's Grace Community Church in Los Angeles County, California, and how they responded to the COVID-19 mandates, restrictions, lockdowns, how they kept their church open, and then juxtaposing it against history, where various governments around the world have tried to impose their will on places of worship. So I'm looking forward to that. I might do a video tomorrow talking about that a bit. Who knows? Anyway, good night. God bless, and we'll talk to you soon.